I don't know why I'm so overcome with emotion today, but I am. I want to talk about parenting children and family dynamics. And I believe and I see that, my children have come into this world very much their own beings. And we have 2 biological children and 1 adopted from Ethiopia. And he is a very spirited, amazing person who I know chose to come to us. And I guess my question goes to a number of layered things. Number 1, there's how I parent, and there's how my husband parents. And
number 1, there's how you feel. Number 1,
yes.
There's how you feel. Number 1, there's how you feel. Number 1, there's how you feel.
Absolutely.
Number 1, there's how you feel about how you parent. Number 1, there's how you feel about how your husband parents. But
yes.
There's only how you feel.
And this goes to the gentleman talking about having this business with his wife. And my question is a little bit of a layer on that and a little bit in the dynamics of my children together and see, this sounds like I want to control who they are, which of course I want them to grow up to believe they can do anything. I want them to grow up with much love. And there's a lot of story. There's a lot of, she did this, he said this, and I find myself, it grates on me after a while. I try to stay, centered myself, and I try to say I don't want to hear the story.
Your children are parenting back or mirroring back what they are learning in the environment that is around them. So as you are trying to sort out how to feel good under those conditions, and in a sense explaining to us why it's hard to hold your balance under those conditions, that's exactly what they're explaining. It's hard for me to hold my balance under these conditions because he did that and she did that and she did that and she did that and he did that and she did that and he did that. In other words, it's the same sort of thing. So somebody has to stop the chain of pain.
I knew you were going to say this.
Well, you will find such freedom in being unconditional. In other words, because it feels when someone, and squabbles happen like that, Esther said, no squabbling, no wobbling. In other words, because the squabbling makes her wobble. Squabbling makes her wobble.
Yep.
She just sees no reason to squabble. Squabbling makes me wobble, so no squabbling, no wobbling. And we say, that's conditional, Esther. Don't make your wobble-freeness be about absence of squabbling. Otherwise, you can't be in the world. You can't go anywhere, and it's all conditional. So what Esther really wants to say is, go ahead and squabble. I just choose not to wobble, which means I'm not going to make the way I feel conditional on what you do. But she's got to practice it where they're not squabbling, because if you don't even give your attention to it until the wobble-squabble is already in place, then you're not likely to find your footing. So it really is about getting yourself in that stable place and getting yourself in that stable place, getting into unconditional love alignment, and then. Mm-hmm. Because what's happening to you, you don't want this to be true, and Esther doesn't want it to be true of herself either. But what happens to you is that you really believe, this is a flawed belief and it doesn't serve you, you really believe that their squabbling is eroding your stability and that they need to stop it. Mm-hmm. And they believe the same about whatever it is they're complaining to you about. And that is just untrue, because if it is true, then none of you have any chance of ever being stable, because there is always going to be something out there that is a condition that you can't stand. And when you start trying to fix conditions so that you can feel better, all that happens is law of attraction just brings you more conditions to fix, until pretty soon you're not just dealing with your own relationship between source, which is all you've got to do. Now you're dealing with your relationship with your children, the 3 of them, and now you're trying to deal with the relationships between them, and now you're trying to deal with the relationship between your husband and each of them, and your husband and you about them, and there just become so many moving parts that you lose your way. But once you really get it, that all you have to focus on, and the only thing that you can control, is the vibrational stance from which you are approaching that. But you got to get a head start on it. You got to really be if you will take the time to sync up with source and sync up with source and sync up with source and sync up with source, their squabbles won't make you wobble. Their squabbles don't cause source to wobble.